Clara Hensley thrived in solitude. At 52, she'd carved a quiet existence in a sprawling, weather-beaten house on the edge of Asheville, North Carolina, a town cradled by mountains and draped in mist. Her husband, Tom, had died 5 years ago, a heart attack that stole him mid-laugh, leaving her alone with their two grown sons, now scattered, one in Raleigh, the other in Denver. Clara worked as a librarian, her days spent among whispering pages and soft footsteps, her nights in the old house, its creaks and sighs a familiar companion. She loved the stillness, the way the wind whistled through the window cracks, the way the silence stretched wide and unbroken. That Wednesday morning in late October was no exception. Tom's mother, Evelyn, who'd lived with Clara since his death, had left at dawn for a church retreat, her suitcase rattling down the porch steps. Back Friday, she'd called, her voice bright, oblivious to the relief Clara felt at the prospect of 2 days alone. Clara pulled the quilt tighter around her shoulders, her eyes glued to her phone, fingers scrolling through news, fires in California, a politician's scandal, nothing that touched her here. The house was a cavern without Evelyn's chatter, the kind of quiet that amplified every sound, the slow tick of the mantel clock, the rustle of leaves skittering across the porch, her own breath fogging in the chilly air. She'd planned a day of nothing, coffee, a book, maybe a walk along the ridge if the rain held off. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine. Clara sighed, sinking deeper into the couch, the quilt a shield against the cold seeping through the walls. She thought she'd have the house to herself, a rare gift after years of sharing it. Then the front door banged open. She froze, the phone slipping in her hands, the screen dimming. Evelyn's retreat was 2 hours away, she couldn't be back. No one else had a key, not since Tom's death. Her breath caught, a vague fear prickling her spine, her stomach tightening as footsteps echoed on the hardwood, slow, heavy, deliberate. She stood, the quilt pooling at her feet, her eyes darting to the hall. A silhouette loomed in the doorway, tall and stooped, and Clara's heart lurched as recognition hit. Grandpa Walt, Tom's father, Evelyn's ex-husband, a man who hadn't set foot in this house in a decade. They stared at each other, the wind whistling through the open door, a cold gust swirling between them. Walt's face was a map of lines, deep wrinkles framing pale blue eyes, his silver hair thinning under a worn cap. He wore a faded flannel jacket, his hands shoved in his pockets, his presence a shockwave in the quiet. "Didn't know you were here," he said, his voice low, gravelly like a confession whispered in the dark. "Me neither," Clara replied, her tone flat, unsteady. Something was wrong, not dangerous, not yet, but off, a dissonance she couldn't name. Walt wasn't the wandering type. He lived 20 miles away in a trailer by the river, a recluse since his divorce from Evelyn 15 years ago, his visits to family rare and planned. Why was he here, unannounced, his eyes meeting hers with a look she couldn't read, not surprise, not guilt, but something heavier. The wind slammed the door shut behind him, the bang jolting her. He stepped inside, placing his keys on the hall table, the clink too loud in the stillness. "You eaten?" he asked, his voice absent, his gaze drifting past her to the empty room. She shook her head, her throat tight. "Not hungry." She didn't move, didn't know what to do with him here, Walt, the man who'd faded from their lives, now standing in her living room like a ghost summoned by the storm. He nodded slow and shuffled toward the kitchen. "Tea then?" It was a question, but he didn't wait for an answer, his boots scuffing the floor. Clara followed, drawn by instinct, her bare feet cold against the wood. She perched on a stool at the table, hands clasped, watching him fill the kettle, his movements precise but weary, sleeves rolled neatly, fingers tracing the teapot's handle, wrinkles deepening as he frowned at nothing. The silence stretched, broken only by the kettle's hum, steam curling into the dim light. Clara studied him, really saw him, not as Tom's father, not as Evelyn's ex, but as a man, a stranger with stories she'd never asked for. His hands trembled slightly, age or something else, and his eyes, those pale blue eyes, held a weight she hadn't noticed before. "Why are you here, Walt?" she asked, soft, the question slipping out before she could stop it. He didn't look up, just poured the tea, the liquid amber in the cups. "Had to see the place," he said, cryptic, his voice a low rumble. "Been a while." She frowned, the unease growing. 10 years, she said, sharper now. "You don't just show up." He slid a cup toward her, finally meeting her gaze, his expression unreadable. "Maybe I do now," he said, and sat across from her, the chair creaking under his weight. The wind howled, rain tapping the windows, a rhythm that matched the pulse in her ears. They sipped in silence, the tea warm but bitter, an unspoken tension coiling between them. Clara's mind raced. Walt's trailer was a fortress of solitude, his life a mystery since the divorce. Tom had rarely spoken of him, just fragments. A mechanic, a drinker once, a man who left when the marriage soured. Yet here he was, in her kitchen, his presence a breach in her carefully guarded world. Then he spoke sudden low. "When I was your age I ran," he said, staring into his cup. "Left everything, Evelyn, Tom, this house. Thought I'd find something better." Clara blinked, caught off guard. Walt didn't talk, not like this. "Why tell me now?" she asked, her voice small, trembling. He looked up, his eyes piercing, raw. "Because you're running too," he said, simple, devastating. "I see it in your eyes, you're quiet. You're lost, Clara." Her breath hitched, his words a mirror she hadn't asked for. She'd buried Tom, raised her boys, kept the house, the job, but lost. She shook her head, denial sharp. "I'm fine," she lied, the word brittle. He smiled, faint, sad. "Sure," he said, and stood, rinsing his cup, the moment slipping away. "I'll go. Storm's coming." She didn't stop him, didn't move as he grabbed his keys and left, the door thudding shut, the silence rushing back. But his words lingered, "You're lost," a splinter in her chest. She sat there, the tea cooling, the rain hammering, and felt the house shift, the quiet no longer a comfort but a hollow echo. Hours later the phone rang, Evelyn, her voice chipper. "Retreat's great, hon. How's home?" Clara mumbled a reply, her mind elsewhere, Walt's visit a secret she couldn't share. She hung up and the doorbell rang. Her heart sank. She opened it, expecting Walt again, but it was a delivery, a small box, no sender, just her name scrawled in sharp ink. Inside, a key, old, rusted, unfamiliar, and a note, "You'll need this. W. Her blood ran cold, the key heavy in her palm, a mystery she didn't want. Outside, the storm broke, lightning cracking the sky, and Clara knew her quiet day was gone, replaced by something darker, something she couldn't outrun. Clara Hensley didn't sleep that night. The key sat on the kitchen table, its rusted edges glinting under the bulb, the note, "You'll need this. W. A taunt she couldn't shake. The storm raged outside, rain lashing the windows, thunder rattling the old house like a warning. She paced, her bare feet tracing the worn hardwood, Walt's words, "You're lost," looping in her skull. He'd seen her, pierced her armor, and left this thing, a riddle she didn't ask for. By dawn the rain had slowed, the sky a bruised gray, but the unease clung, a shadow she couldn't sweep away. She tried routine, coffee brewed, toast charred, the library calling, but her hands trembled, the key a magnet pulling her back. Walt's visit wasn't random, it was deliberate, a crack in the wall she'd built since Tom's death. She hadn't run, not like he'd said, she'd stayed, held the family, the house together. Yet his eyes, his certainty, gnawed at her. Was she lost? The quiet she'd loved felt hollow now, a lie she'd told herself too long. By noon she couldn't stand it. She grabbed the key, her coat, and drove 20 miles west to Walt's trailer by the French Broad River, the road slick with rain, her pulse a drumbeat. She hadn't been there in years, not since Tom dragged her once, a tense visit ending in silence. The trailer squatted in a clearing, rusted and sagging, surrounded by pines and junk car parts, a broken chair, a tarp flapping in the wind. Walt's truck was gone, the place deserted, but the door hung ajar, swaying in the breeze. Clara hesitated, the key cold in her fist, then stepped inside. The air was thick, mildew, tobacco, the faint tang of whiskey. A single bulb flickered, casting shadows over a cluttered space. A sagging couch, a table buried in papers, a wall of photos, Tom as a boy, Evelyn young and smiling, Walt stern beside them. Her breath caught, the past a punch she hadn't braced for. She scanned the room, the key a question burning her palm. What did her open? A trunk sat in the corner, old wooden, padlocked. Her heart lurched, the key's shape matching the lock's jagged slot. She knelt, hands shaking, and slid it in. It turned, the click loud in the silence, and the lid creaked open. Inside, chaos, letters, photos, a journal, a revolver rested shut. She lifted a photo, Walt and a woman, not Evelyn, her face soft, unfamiliar, their arms linked, dated 1975. Another, the same woman, pregnant, Walt beside her, his smile wide. Clara's stomach twisted, Evelyn and Walt married in 76. Who was she? The journal was next, its leather cracked, pages yellowed. She flipped it open, Walt's tight script spilling secrets, June 75, Med-El. She's everything I didn't know I needed. He doesn't suspect. August 75, Eltikes pregnant. Can't tell E. Leaving's the only way. October 75, she's gone. Took the girl. I'm a coward. Clara's breath stopped, the pieces snapping together. Walt had another family, a daughter, a life he'd abandoned before Tom was born. The key wasn't just to the trunk, it was to a past he'd buried. Footsteps crunched outside, heavy, slow. She shoved the journal back, slamming the trunk, her heart pounding as Walt stepped in, rain-soaked, his eyes widening. "Clara." His voice was rough, startled. "What are you doing?" She stood, the key clenched in her fist, fury overtaking fear. "You left this," she snapped, holding it up. "What the hell is it?" "Who's Elle?" His face paled, the lines deepening, and he sank onto the couch, hands trembling. "You weren't supposed to find that," he said, low, defeated. "Too late," she hissed, stepping closer. "A daughter, Walt. Before Tom. You ran from her too." He looked up, eyes wet, raw. "Leela," he said, the name a wound. Her name was Leela. She died, car wreck, 76. The girl, my girl, survived. I couldn't face it, couldn't tell Evelyn. I ran." Clara's chest tightened, anger and pity warring. "And the key? Why give it to me?" He exhaled, slow, broken. "Because she's here," he said, his voice cracking. "In Asheville. Found me last month. Want answers?" "I can't, I thought you could." Her blood ran cold, the room spinning. "Me? Why me?" "You're steady," he said, meeting her gaze, his eyes pleading. "Stronger than me. She's your family too, Tom's sister." The words hit like a sledgehammer, shattering her world. A sister-in-law she'd never known, a secret Tom died without. "No," she said, stepping back, the key digging into her palm. "You don't get to dump this on me." "I'm dying," he said, blunt, final. "Cancer. Months maybe." "She deserves to know, someone does." Clara froze, the fight draining out, replaced by a hollow ache. She turned, stumbling out, the rain soaking her, Walt's voice fading, asterisk, "Clara, wait." Asterisk, but she didn't stop. She drove home, the key on the passenger seat, a grenade ticking beside her. The house was dark, Evelyn still gone, and she sank onto the couch, the journals weighed a ghost in her hands. The phone rang, Evelyn, oblivious, prattling about the retreat. Clara mumbled replies, her mind on Leela, the girl, Walt's confession. She hung up, and a knock rattled the door. Her heart sank, expecting Walt, but it was a woman, mid-40s, blonde, eyes like Tom's, sharp and blue. "Clara Hensley?" she asked, voice steady, rain dripping from her hood. "Yes," Clara croaked, dread pooling in her gut. "I'm Sarah," the woman said, stepping closer, her gaze piercing. "Walt's daughter. We need to talk." Clara's breath stopped, the key burning a hole in her pocket, Sarah's face a mirror of Tom's she couldn't unsee. The storm roared, the house trembling, and Clara knew her quiet life was over, torn open by a past she didn't choose, a family she didn't want, and a truth she couldn't bury. Clara Hensley didn't invite Sarah in, not at first. The woman stood on the porch, rain streaking her face, her blue eyes, Tom's eyes, boring into Clara's soul. The key in her pocket was a lead weight, Walt's confession a noose tightening around her neck. "We need to talk," Sarah repeated, her voice firm, unshaken by the storm or Clara's silence. Lightning cracked, illuminating her features, sharp cheekbones, a faint scar on her jaw, a stranger wearing her husband's ghost. Clara stepped back, the door creaking wider, her voice a rasp. "Come in." Sarah nodded, shedding her hood, water pooling on the hardwood as she crossed the threshold. The house felt smaller, the quiet suffocating, Walt's shadow stretching from the trailer to this moment. They sat at the kitchen table, the bulb flickering, the key between them like a judge's gavel. Sarah's hands were steady, clasped, her gaze unwavering. "Walt told you," she said, not a question, a fact. "About me." Clara nodded, slow, her throat tight. "Yesterday. The key, his trunk." "Leela. You." Sarah's lips twitched, a bitter half-smile. "He's a coward," she said, low, sharp. "Left me with nothing, no name, no father. Found him last month, tracked him here. He wouldn't face me, sent me to you." Anger flared hot and sudden. "He's dying," Clara snapped, defending him despite herself. "Cancer. Said you deserved answers." Sarah's eyes darkened, a flicker of pain breaking her steel. "Dying doesn't fix it," she said, leaning forward. "I've got no mother, no roots, raised in foster homes, scraps of her letters all I had. He owes me more than a key." Clara's chest ached, pity and rage warring. "I didn't know," she said, soft, raw. "Tom didn't either. Walt kept it buried." Sarah's gaze softened just a fraction. "I believe you," she said. "But you're here. Your family, his wife's kin. I need something, anything." The weight of it crushed her, Tom's sister, Walt's guilt, a legacy she didn't ask for. "What do you want?" Clara asked, her voice trembling. "Truth," Sarah said, simple, fierce. "Who he was, why he left. And you knew him. Tell me." Clara exhaled, the past rushing up, Walt's rare visits, his silence, the man Tom loved but barely understood. He was quiet, she said, slow, piecing it together. Worked cars, drank too much once. Left Evelyn when Tom was a kid, never said why. I thought it was just them falling apart. Not this. Sarah listened, her face a mask, but her eyes betrayed her. Hunger, hurt, a child's longing beneath the steel. Leela, my mom, she wrote him, she said, pulling a folded letter from her coat, yellowed and creased. Found it in her things after she died. Said he promised to come back. He didn't. Clara took it, hands shaking, Walt script a gut punch. Asterisk, I'll fix this, L. Wait for me. Asterisk, dated 76 months before the crash. He ran, she whispered, tears burning. Like he told me. Sarah nodded, her jaw tight. And now he's running again through you. The doorbell rang shrill, shattering the moment. Clara flinched, Sarah's eyes narrowing as Evelyn's voice called, Clara. I'm back, early rain's a mess. The door opened, Evelyn bustling in, her retreat glow fading as she saw Sarah. Who's this? Evelyn asked, her tone bright but edged, eyeing the stranger at her table. Clara froze, Sarah's gaze locking on hers, a silent dare. Sarah, Clara said, slow, the lie forming before she could stop it. Old friend from the library. Evelyn nodded, oblivious, dropping her bag. Nice to meet you, Han. Tea. She bustled to the kettle, chatter filling the silence, but Sarah's eyes burned, asterisk why. Asterisk, in Clara's gut twisted. She couldn't tell Evelyn, not yet, not with Walt's death looming, not with Tom's memory at stake. Sarah stood abrupt. I'll go, she said low to Clara alone. But this isn't over. She left, the door thudding, Evelyn prattling on, unaware of the bomb ticking in her house. That night Clara lay beside Evelyn's snores, the key hidden in a drawer, Sarah's face haunting her. She'd lied, protected Walt, Evelyn herself, but at what cost? Morning brought a call, Walt, his voice weak. She came, didn't she? Yes, Clara said cold. You should have told her yourself. I can't, he rasped. Hospital now, surgery tomorrow. Come see me. She went, the key in her pocket, the hospital sterile and stark. Walt lay in a bed, tubes snaking from his arm, his face gaunt. Sarah's real, he said, eyes wet. Tell her I'm sorry, everything. You tell her, Clara snapped, but his hand gripped hers, frail but fierce. Too late, he said, a tear slipping free. You're my chance. She pulled away, anger boiling, but his plea lingered. She drove home, the key a-burn, and found Sarah on the porch, rain-soaked, resolute. He's dying, Clara said blunt. Wants you to know he's sorry. Sarah's face crumpled, rage and grief colliding. Sorry doesn't fix it, she said, but tears fell and Clara stepped closer, hesitant. He's scared, she said soft. Like me, like you maybe. Sarah looked at her raw, vulnerable. You're not like him, she said and turned, disappearing into the storm. Walt died Thursday, surgery failing, his last breath a whisper Clara didn't hear. She told Evelyn cancer, not the rest, her lie a shield. Sarah didn't come to the funeral, but a letter arrived. Asterisk, thanks for the truth. I'm gone, don't look for me. Asterisk with it, a photo, Tom and Sarah, young, laughing, a picnic Clara didn't remember, Walt cropped out. Clara burned it, the flames eating the edges, and stood in the kitchen, the bulb steady now. The quiet returned, but it was different, fuller, heavier, a hollow filled with echoes she couldn't silence. She didn't know where Sarah went, didn't know if she'd healed or broken her, but she knew she wasn't lost, not entirely. Walt's truth, Sarah's pain, had anchored her, a tether to a family she'd never claimed. Friday, Evelyn chattered, the house alive again, but Clara sat with her coffee, the key in her hand, and smiled, small, real. Nothing was wrong, nothing was right, but she wasn't alone in the hollow anymore.